Hello, and welcome to Talk the Walk. I'm Azam Khan. China's pursuit in increasing yuan-settled cross-border payments is full steam ahead, with a long list of potential platforms for its currency to become more global. The change would have huge impacts on de-dollarization, but the transition has ways to go still. A few months back, Hong Kong launched a pilot run of a digital local dollar. The city's officials have expressed the desire to become a Web3 hub, a framework for a digital economy centered around blockchain. And now, the city's de facto bank has promised to roll out regulations on stablecoins by next year. What role can Hong Kong play in the internationalization of the digital yuan? Joining me to discuss the topic is an influential voice in fintech and global speaker on central bank digital currencies and blockchain. He is an honorary fellow at the Asian Institute of International Financial Law at the University of Hong Kong, and a board director of the Global Impact FinTech Forum, Dr. Oriol Caudevilla. Thank you for taking the time, Mr. Caudevilla.
Thank you very much, Assam, for inviting me.
Yeah, when you see all the different angles that the yuan is currently being used internationally as a digital currency, whether it's traction in Latin America or the Gulf, how significant of a headway is this in the de-dollarization process generally?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question. I think that first of all, I need to specify or clarify that what's being used internationally right now is still the yuan, not the not the digital yuan. So we are not yet there in a phase where the digital yuan is being used internationally, to settle cross-border transactions. We are not there yet. We'll get there, but it's not the time yet. But I think it's a very interesting question, which mixes many different ideas. And first of all, I think it's important to clarify. I know that most of the audience will know that, but still, that the digital yuan is a central bank digital currency. And that's very important because I know that sometimes when people talk about central bank digital currencies or CBDCs, they tend to think of cryptocurrencies sometimes. And I think that's actually not accurate because central bank digital currencies are not cryptocurrencies. CBDCs are issued by a central bank. They are going to be legal tender. They are going to be, to put it some way, the same money that we are using, but in a digital form. So they are going to be a digital form of legal tender, to put it this way. So as you can see, the idea is completely different from that of cryptocurrencies, despite the fact that technologically speaking, it is true that the realm of CBDCs may have adopted certain elements from the world of cryptocurrencies, but still, I think the purpose of both of them is actually very different. And I think that China is a clear example. I mean, as you all know, mainland China adopted a tough stance towards cryptocurrencies, whereas China has strongly bet on its own CBDC, the digital yuan. So I think that's the first idea that I wanted to highlight right now. And then it's all about mixing this idea of digital yuan and CBDCs with de-dollarization. Well, I think it's undeniable that we are in the midst of de-dollarization trends. I mean, it is we can describe de-dollarization as the process of reducing the reliance on the US dollar as a reserve currency, as a medium of exchange, etc. I think that well, this process is undeniable. I mean, some countries may decide to go for de-dollarization for central bank reserve diversification reasons. They may want perhaps to reduce their dependency on the US policies. No, I mean, the reasons may be several, but the thing is, we are in the midst of these trends. It is hard to say to what extent this will materialize, meaning that whereas it is true that we are in the midst of these trends, I cannot say, that the dollar will lose all of its importance overnight or anything like that. We've been seeing, and this is not new, this started to happen maybe in the 2007 and 8 global financial crisis. We've seen this increasing questioning of the supremacy of the US dollar in international trade. This is a process that has been going on for years, especially for the last 15 years. And I think that lately the rising interest rates plus the recent debt ceiling crisis in the US have raised many concerns in other countries about the idea whether the US dollar should continue being or holding this position of supremacy or not.
is the digital yuan, is that capable of speeding up the de-dollarization in a sense? Because in terms of de-dollarization, we've seen the yuan being used in certain transactions, which is what I was trying to refer to, whether it's for oil trade or for oil transactions or what have you. So, but can the digital yuan help to speed this up? Is that the idea?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we are seeing these trends in general. No, I mean, we saw, for example, during the World Economic Forum in Davos, the Saudi Arabia's finance minister saying that the kingdom is open to trading in currencies other than the US dollar. We saw Brazilian President Lula in Beijing, I think it was in April, saying as well that they were considering to use other currencies, no, to settle international trade exchanges than the US dollar. So we are seeing this interest in many countries. And now you ask me whether digital yuan can play a role in that. And the answer is yes. I mean, let me put it this way. We don't need the digital yuan, or China doesn't need the digital yuan in order to let's say, dig deeper on these de-dollarization trends. That's true. But of course, digital yuan will help. And I mean, China realized that there is, according to them, a problem. No, I mean, the Chinese government laid out that the dollar dominance is, according to them, worrying in the sense that it's a source of instability. So in that sense, digital yuan can be an important and interesting tool to try to deepen in these trends.
Right.
However, when I say that digital yuan can be a trend or a tool to deepen in this trend, I'm not saying by that it's the only possible tool. You know, I mean, we don't need CBDCs for that, but of course, this can be an important element in these trends.
And would you say that the different regional blocks like the RCEP and the BRICS, like these are different platforms where it's capable of implementing the digital yuan, but also just generally using the yuan as a currency?
Yes, indeed. I think that digital yuan can be beneficial for China in many different ways, same as most CBDCs for each country. No, I mean, they can promote, financial inclusion, etc., and many other things. They can make payments faster, but I think that the digital yuan will have a clear benefit for China when it comes to trying to internationalize China's yuan through the digital yuan.
Right.
There are several platforms where this internationalization makes initially much more sense. And I think that two of them, as I covered in a report that I published last year, are the Belt and Road Initiative and also the RCEP Free Trade Agreement. Those two areas, to put it some way, are to me like perhaps the best two initial candidates for China to try to internationalize the yuan using the digital yuan. These are not, though, the only ones. I mean, China, for example, could in the future use the digital yuan to settle transactions, let's say, in sub-Saharan Africa or the Middle East. No, but I think that the most natural first two places to go are these two that I said, the Belt and Road Initiative and RCEP.
Right. What role can Hong Kong play in helping to facilitate the growth of and the usage of the digital yuan? I mentioned at the top of the show all the different ways that Hong Kong has, and especially in the past few months, been pushing to develop its digital economy. So is it more of a pilot sort of role of being able to try out different schemes?
No, I mean, initially, yes. I mean, we all know that Hong Kong, for example, started to test 2 years ago the digital yuan for international transactions. So, of course, this idea of testing, etc., is important when it comes to Hong Kong, but it's much more than that. I mean, Hong Kong is in a perfect position to play a key role in internationalizing the yuan. First of all, given Hong Kong's role as one of the world's most important financial centers, but also due to the fact that more than 70% of global offshore renminbi payments are processed in Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong is the most important offshore RMB center. So I think in that sense, Hong Kong has a key role to play. In addition to that, I mean, it's what you said before. No, I mean, it's not only that Hong Kong is a very important RMB offshore center. Hong Kong is also becoming much more and more digitalized in every possible way. I mean, Hong Kong is working on several CBDC projects. Hong Kong is trying to become an even more important fintech, green tech hub. So I think that overall, Hong Kong is in a perfect position to leverage that.
Right. And I mentioned at the top of the show, the Hong Kong rolling out regulations for its stablecoin. Could you just talk about what exactly is stablecoin what the role it is, and what the regulations mean?
Sure. A stable coin is a cryptocurrency whose value is pegged to an asset. No, I mean, let's say, for example, it's normally pegged to a fiat currency or maybe to gold. Most stable coins are US dollar denominated, like USDT, for example. No, stable coins are considered like to be to put it some way, the safest cryptocurrencies, in the sense that, unlike, for example, a Bitcoin, the value of a stable coin is not supposed to go up and down, up and down. It's supposed to be stable, hence its name. I mean, I said it's supposed to be because last year, for example, we saw that it's not necessarily like that, because it depends on an algorithm, but theoretically speaking, it's like that. So Hong Kong is tapping into the stablecoin arena as well by what you said before, no, these plans to create a stable coin, etc. But I think it's much more than that. It's much more than a stable coin what Hong Kong is doing, because Hong Kong is also working on several central bank digital currency projects at the same time. I said before that Hong Kong tested the digital yuan for cross-border payments, but the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, HKMA, which is, as you know, Hong Kong's de facto central bank, is also working on the M-Bridge project, which is a very interesting wholesale CBDC project, which involves as well the central banks of China, Thailand, and United Arab Emirates. And then there is also the electronic Hong Kong dollar project, which will be a very relevant one for Hong Kongers as well in the years to come. So as you can see, there is all this technological prowess, in there, mixed in Hong Kong, combined, which makes us say that Hong Kong is much more than just, a CBDC, a stablecoin, this whole ecosystem. And you mentioned the regulations as well. Well, that's very important, because I think that the key area or shortcoming when it comes to all this DeFi, Web3 world is precisely sometimes the lack of regulations. This is what causes, in many cases, all those crises that we saw last year. I mean, we all saw what happened to FTX. It's the lack of regulation. And I think it's very important for Hong Kong to be at the forefront of this movement and try to regulate this area as intensely and well as possible, as Hong Kong is doing right now.
Mr. Caudevilla, I need to pause you right there while we step away for a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after the break with Oriol Caudevilla. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Talk the Walk. I'm speaking to fintech expert Dr. Oriol Caudevilla. Mr. Caudevilla, earlier this year, the Hong Kong government had launched a pilot scheme usage of its digital currency. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that and its potentiality.
I think that's a very interesting topic, because this shows us once again that Hong Kong is at the forefront of the work on CBDCs. I mean, generally speaking, I think that Asia is a continent in the world where CBDCs are attracting much more interest, but Hong Kong, especially the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, has a deep knowledge of this area, because it started working on the M-Bridge project like a while ago, a few years ago, and then digital yuan, and now the electronic Hong Kong dollar. So I think the Hong Kong's expertise, Hong Kong's experience is one of the biggest in the world, because of the different CBDC projects in which the HKMA is currently involved. I think that having an electronic Hong Kong dollar, if eventually deployed in the future in Hong Kong, will be, of course, beneficial. As I said before, CBDCs can make payments more efficient and have many different benefits. The idea of potentially deploying an electronic Hong Kong dollar started over 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, when the FinTech 2025 strategy was unveiled. And, recently, I think it was on May 18, the CEO of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, Eddie Wai-man, announced the starting of the pilot program, which involves 16 companies to start testing the digital currency for public use in shops, restaurants, and money transfers. So this shows you this latest moves that, we are moving forward with the electronic Hong Kong dollar project.
Would you say that relative to the rest of the world, Hong Kong has been very proactive in the recent months with regard to digital assets? It also launched earlier this month the regulation, trading rules, licensing guidelines for cryptocurrencies, which represents one of the world's most exacting regulatory framework, which I don't think many regions in the world, correct me if I'm wrong, right now have. And all of this coming in the backdrop of a crypto winter.
Definitely, you're right. I mean, I think that what Hong Kong has been doing, especially since October, November, has been actually very remarkable in that sense. I think to some extent that, well, I mean, the pandemic caught everyone off guard, of course, but to some extent, Hong Kong lost a bit of track during the pandemic. I mean, because, well, I mean,
The
Hong
lockdown
Kong
and
was
everything.
maybe, lockdown, more isolated from the world than other places. So initially we saw, for example, Singapore leveraging much more the fact of opening before Hong Kong. So there was a point last year, let's say August, September, where for a moment, I'm not going to say I suffered for Hong Kong, because Hong Kong is always going to remain like a top global financial center, but where you could start to see or wonder, like, where's Hong Kong going to be? But I think that it was after September, October, where things started to change. At least I'm talking more about the digital area. No? I mean, I'm not just talking about in general, I'm talking more focus on digitalization. And I think it was September, October. I actually had the pleasure of speaking at the Hong Kong FinTech Week. And I remember that the day before I spoke in a panel, the Financial Services and Treasury Bureau announced that crypto regulations would be amended in Hong Kong to allow retail investors to participate in the crypto markets, etc. So I think it was then when things started to change. And I think that especially since January, February, we've seen like this huge change. Now we are seeing the Hong Kong government invest Hong Kong, FinTech Hong Kong, which is doing like a great job in trying, to attract like much more FinTech and DeFi talent in Hong Kong. We are seeing new immigration schemes being created. So I think that it is not too bold to say that in a few years from now, or maybe months, Hong Kong will be for sure one of the world's most important. I cannot say the most important because I don't know for sure, but at least one of the top 3 or 5 most important, Web3, DeFi, FinTech hubs for sure.
And that dichotomy that you were just explaining is also a similar dichotomy in the sense that the Chinese mainland market, as you're well aware, is not that open to cryptocurrencies, and yet its SAR is trying to push ahead so much more. So you have another interesting dichotomy with that. So how does China reconcile with that reality with its pursuits in other digital assets, its pursuit for the digital yuan, for example? Can you just talk about that dynamic?
Well, yes. I mean, I think, first of all, no, I mean, it is acceptable for every country to regulate like cryptocurrencies, DeFi, Web3, however they want. What I mean by that is that I don't think there is like one right way to approach this or a wrong way. China decided to be much tougher towards cryptocurrencies because of several reasons. I mean, financial stability, this and that.
Yeah.
Whereas Hong Kong is now moving in the opposite direction, which I think to some extent can make sense, because we know that in the financial realm for this last 25, 26 years, Hong Kong has been many times going in different directions than the mainland, which doesn't mean that they are actually colliding. I mean, we all know that Hong Kong
absolutely, yeah,
playing a very important role for China in many ways, allowing China sometimes to get to places where it wouldn't be able to
learn from it exactly. And also, like you just mentioned, like it's also still such in the relative scheme of things, cryptocurrency is such a new thing, and it's still in the early stages. So obviously, it makes sense for everyone to have a different approach to it. Yeah.
Exactly. And we're talking about risky areas. I mean, there is no risk in issuing a CBDC like the digital yuan, because what China is doing is basically issuing a central bank digital currency. And a central bank digital currency is, I know it sounds obvious, but it's central bank issued, which means that all the risks are controlled by the People's Bank of China, the central bank. So I think in that sense there is no risk, because or the risks are more manageable. But when we talk about cryptocurrencies, especially cryptocurrencies in such a big economy like China, in an economy which used to have until recently and even now issues like the amount of the shadow banking system, etc., you need to be much more careful. So I think in that sense, Hong Kong as a playground or even as a huge sandbox for China works perfectly to see, well, what can happen now if you open. I'm not saying by that China will open up to cryptocurrencies in the future. I mean, I don't know. Right now, it seems very unlikely. So I cannot say that. But we all know for sure that Hong Kong is moving in that direction, and that will benefit China too, as well. Because I mean, anything that benefits Hong Kong benefits China.
That makes sense. And also, right now in the world, there's a general low trust towards central banks globally, given what all the banking fiascos that's happened recently. So it definitely paves the way for a lot more of this. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the U.S. Treasury. Treasury Chief Janet Yellen visiting Beijing to try and stabilize economic relations. I just wanted to get your quick thoughts on that.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen, focused on the risks of de-risking. She focused her visit on trying to talk about how a full separation of both economies would be harmful. And this is true. I mean, China and the US are the world's top two economies. I mean, US first, then China, but China will surpass the US in the future. No, I mean, we don't know when yet. But the thing is, we are talking about the two most important actors in the players in the world economy. So
very integrated economies.
Exactly. I mean, they both need to cooperate. I remember actually the first article I ever wrote for a Hong Kong newspaper. Right now, I'm writing for China Daily, so China Morning Post, but my first article was for China Daily back 5 years ago in summer. And I wrote precisely about the trade war. It was when President Trump started the trade war, to put pressure on China. And I said that this would be disastrous in the sense that it's not just that China and the US are intertwined, both economies. It's also that many other countries are affected by that. I mean, the global supply chain, for example, when more tariffs were put to Chinese products, the US was not only harming China, they were also harming, anyone in between, from the Czech Republic to Spain to the United Arab Emirates, everyone. So the idea is we are living in a tricky world. I mean, we see that there are many conflicts, many disagreements. So I think that anything that contributes to creating a much smoother environment should be welcome. And I think in that sense, that visit was important because I don't think that there is any future for the world, let me put it this way, any good future if, the number one and number two countries are fighting. I think it is very important for both of them to cooperate, to keep cooperating in every possible way, because I know that rivalry will exist, but as long as it's a healthy rivalry, it's going to be fine.
And I know you've written about Hong Kong's potentiality to be a green finance hub, and that's something that which the government has voiced as well. Its goal to do that. What are some things that, in your opinion, that the city needs to focus and harness on, and not simply just rely on resting on laurels as being a gateway to the mainland?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question as well, because when we say about Hong Kong becoming much more digital, we all, or most people, tend to think initially in what we said before, DeFi, Web3, cryptocurrencies, metaverse, this and that. But I think it's much more than that, because the digital arena is much more than that. For example, when we talk about fintech, fintech is not just DeFi, cryptocurrency, it's also green tech, RegTech, artificial intelligence. It involves many different areas, all on which Hong Kong has the potential to become much more important if possible. And one of these areas is green tech. I remember that Hong Kong Financial Secretary Paul Chan made a strong pitch, I think it was in February, trying to encourage investments to Hong Kong in this area, in the area of green tech. If I'm not mistaken, the first bond scheme in green, the first green bond scheme in Hong Kong took place in June 2018. So I'm talking about 5 years ago. And since then, Hong Kong has been trying to, tap into this area much more intensely, even recently as well. Now, the idea is for Hong Kong to attract many more green tech firms. Hong Kong issued as well its first tokenized government green bonds, which was actually the first of this kind in the world. This happened in February, seeing a government issuing a tokenized green bond is actually something that it's not common. I mean, it's the first government in the world ever doing so. And it happened in Hong Kong 4 months ago, or 5. And Hong Kong was also Asia's top issuer of green and sustainable debts last year, raising $80 billion. So Hong Kong is tapping into green tech very intensely as well. And I think that's interesting for Hong Kong, because when we said that Hong Kong is trying to digitalize, I think it would be a mistake to, just focus on, let's say, Web3 and DeFi, which is it's a very interesting area, of course, but I think there's much more to it than that, no?
I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Dr. Oriol Caudevilla, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you very much, Hassan.
That's all for this week. I'll see you same time next week. Goodbye.